Top End station manager Adrian Phillips is known as a bit of a buffalo whisperer.
The passion, there's buffalo blood in our veins pretty well.
The former chopper pilot, contract musterer and butcher credits buffalo to giving him a foot up in life.
Yeah, back then, like, I didn't have 2 cents to rub to my name really when I started, and a bit dangerous, and running portable yards and doing that all up through Arnhem Land.
It was brutal work, but the lure of black gold was a sure way to make fast cash.
I caught cattle, quite a lot of cattle, scrub bulls, contract mustering and all that, but it was the buffalo that I made money out of, black gold in the territory, eh?
Rode on the buffalo's back.
I rode on the buffalo's back, yeah.
Buffalo have a checkered history here. They've been roaming in the Top End for more than 150 years, after being introduced as early as 1825 to use for labour and also their meat. Many of these outlying settlements were abandoned in the mid-1900s, but the buffaloes set up camp permanently. The tuberculosis crisis wiped many out, but it didn't take long for numbers to climb right back up.
Where the administration is researching the possibility of setting up a large-scale buffalo meat industry for human consumption.
Initially, we had meatworks way back then, supplying Catherine and bachelor abattoirs back in them days. So it was pretty good there initially, like it wasn't bad. And then we lost our abattoirs. That made a big change.
Adrian saw the writing on the wall and also had a personal brush with tragedy that saw him trade in the bull catcher for a station manager job at Annabaroo Station in 2014.
I decided to pull up. I also lost a very close friend, you remember, years ago, catching buffalo with me, so that knocked me a bit. And I decided, well, semi-retirement, just come and run a cattle station.
Situated 100 kilometres southeast of Darwin, he's taken on tough country. Massive crocodiles regularly try to steal the cattle, and the seasons can be brutal. The thumping wet or parching dry makes a tough backdrop for running livestock.
Out in my paddocks, I put the buffalo in paddocks that are marginal country where cattle don't do well, but the buffalo are doing very well. I pulled weaners off this year off riverine buffalo. Those weaners come off at 320 kilos live weight, and bang, gone. They're out the gate 12 months on the boat. I can't do that with cattle. It's 18 months with cattle.
An added bonus, the crocs and wild dogs are also more reluctant to take on a large horn-wielding buffalo. Adrian runs 700 buffalo alongside 3,500 cattle. He says the numbers could be higher.
I could easily run probably 3,000 buffalo on top of 4,000 head of cattle.
But it's not cattle where he spies opportunity. He thinks the buffalo trade is on the precipice of finally getting a good foothold. And he's not alone. Louise Bilardo heads up the NT's Buffalo Industry Council and has been advocating for the industry for the past 4 years.
There's been ups and downs in the industry, and we really feel that this is a period of huge opportunity where the industry can have a whole series of disparate aspects come together, and part of that's because of the high price of cattle, and the other is the opportunities to the north in Southeast Asia, and obviously because of COVID, some of the suppliers internationally are no longer there, and Indonesia particularly is very keen not just to have our live buffalo but also to get box buffalo meat.
The Central Agri Group reopened the Rum Jungle Abattoir in December 2019. In 2020, the abattoir processed 7,000 head of buffalo.
What has changed is we have an abattoir that is operational. That is the one big thing that has changed. That has now gone from 20% or 30% of the animals could be sold to now, right now, nearly 100% could be sold.
So where will these buffalo go, Patrick?
The little heifers here are going to Malaysia.
Patrick Underwood brokers deals around the world, supplying buffalo to what he says is a hungry market.
So there's been a big disruption to that supply throughout that market. And also Australian cattle are so expensive. They're very expensive and the supply is short. So buffalo are seen as a genuine alternative.
Live export numbers have been growing steadily. For the first time in 2020, exports surpassed 10,000 head of buffalo from the Darwin port. Prices were also the highest they'd ever been. While buffalo still only commands half of what cattle fetch, the reduction in the national beef herd to the lowest levels in 20 years could see demand for buffalo, as a cheap alternative, rise. Buffalo is a cheaper meat, and that appeals. For several years now, Indonesia and others have been importing Indian buffalo meat because of its low price.
Certainly in Southeast Asia, the emphasis is on red meat, and buffalo and cattle are essentially one and the same, but do have different price points in the wet markets especially. And so the Northern Territory buffalo meat is seen as top of the range. We want to be able to take advantage of the opportunities.
The NT buffalo industry is currently valued at $11 million, but demand far outstrips supply, and it's not because of a lack of animals. Currently, thousands of buffalo are culled every year to keep numbers down, particularly on Indigenous lands. The idea of shooting animals and leaving them to rot just doesn't sit well with many in the industry, who see this as a valuable resource going to waste, particularly when the hungry middle class in Asia is crying out for more protein.
Well, Christy, I'd ask you give me 12 of those green $100 notes, I'll give you a rifle and you shoot them. You'd struggle doing that. So this shooting to waste is ridiculous. And they say that on the environmental side. Okay, shoot to waste. All you're doing with those bodies is feeding all the feral animals, the feral cats, the feral dogs and the pigs, right? So why do it? Yes, we need to manage numbers because it does create an environmental impact, and we see that. But hey, let's get together and get contractors out there.
The industry says what isn't in dispute is that numbers are too high.
We know that the buffalo population in Arnhem Land is increasing. Suggested numbers are approximately 180,000. So we could take off 27 or 30,000 buffalo a year with the right supports through Section 19 land use agreements that have been negotiated through the Northern Land Council, and just literally be holding the numbers, not reducing the numbers significantly. But we know that there are parts of Arnhem Land that really need that to happen sooner than later because they're becoming overstocked or they're becoming dangerous for the communities in the vicinity. And no one wants that, but the alternative to having a steady offtake of animals is shoot to waste.
Adrian says he's come across plenty of young Indigenous men who do well in the buffalo industry.
Some of the best stockmen I've ever employed out there catching and mustering are Indigenous. This is a great opportunity to get some real work happening in their country. But here's an opportunity. Let's run. All this bullshit been going around in circles forever about trying to create employment on communities, on country. Most of the buffalo are on country. Let's make it work.
There's also been a push for more pastoralists and Indigenous groups to pen buffalo, to educate and tame them to improve handling before being loaded onto export ships. Potentially, it would mean lower mortality rates and improving their reputation of being too hard to handle.
And welfare at the end of the day, not is it just about the animal being right, it is your bottom line. Because when I can send an animal that's not fretting, going through the yards, on the truck, on the export, right, it's a win-win. It's a win for the animal. It's a win for the person buying it. But it's a win for our bank manager because we're getting a better return. It's a no-brainer. You know, get your shit in the corner.
He also wants to see more pastoralists doing what he is, trading free-range buffalo, holding on to them and offloading during wet season when contract mustering crews can't access Arnhem Land.
It's not straightforward, but it's definitely an opportunity for them to tap into two markets.
They're a pretty intelligent, inquisitive animal, so the younger they are, the quicker they come round effectively. But we hope the guys that we buy them off, where possible, can introduce them to a shipping pellet, but certainly to hay and eating out of containers, drinking out of troughs, and just spending a little bit of time in and around them.
Currently, one producer supplies 40% of the live export buffalo from December to May.
There's a couple of guys that do background buffalo over the wet season. It's pretty hard. Buffalo are not overly fond of barbed wire. They don't, particularly the bigger ones, often don't stay where they're supposed to. But it's good that we're seeing a lot of people catching buffalo during the season, then keeping the weaners and growing them out over the wet season. So there are 3 or 4 people starting to do that. But we'd like to see people spend the money in the infrastructure. And I think as an exporter, we should pay a premium for buffalo over the wet season to encourage, you know, that year-round aspect.
At Annabrew, they aren't putting all the eggs in just one buffalo market though. Adrian purchased some of the Agricultural Department's research herd and wants to utilise the genetics to breed what he thinks could be a high-end meat.
I call it top-end Wagyu. Yeah, look, it's good eating beef, you can cook it properly, but there's a lot with it, you know. We're looking the feed they're on and what they're doing to get them at such a young age to that weight. The riverine buffalo grow about 30% quicker than the Asian water buffalo and things like that, and they hold a white fat, good white fat. They are different.
Within Australia, there's also demand for boxed buffalo meat, especially in the eastern states, with some nationalities who regularly ate it in their mother country.
They are bred for dairy buffalo, but they yield exceptional quality meat and really good. There's massive demand for meat in the restaurant trade. So I'd like to see that line of buffalo go paddock to plate to the top end with the restaurant trade, right?
After years of talk about possibilities, the industry says it's now or never. And enough with the talk. It's time for action.
That's why Adrian Phillips and what Annabrew Station are doing has got huge gains for the industry overall to be able to have consistency, because no market wants something that's, you know, on and off and boom and bust. We need that consistency.
And make something really happen, you know. But if we want to keep going round in circles like we are, we're going to kiss it all goodbye.